What's going on, everyone? In this video, I'm here with another faction spotlight with the Emirates of Hacan. So, in the last faction spotlight, we were looking at the Sardic Nor, and we saw how they were a very combat-oriented faction, definitely on the far end of the spectrum from diplomatic factions to aggressive fighting factions. With the Emirates of Hacan, we get a complete contrast to that, as we have a faction that's mainly focused on trade good usage and trading in general. And I think the Emirates of Hakan are going to be one of the funnest units to play using the app, because they're very interactive with their special techs and their abilities, really unique in that sense. The only combat uniqueness to this faction is the flagship. We have the Wrath of Kanara. Now, before I started making these faction spotlight videos, I was starting the niche features of the app. And in the first episode of that, you'll actually find everything you need to know about this flagship. So we're not going to go over the Wrath of Kanara in this video, because it has its own dedicated video in the playlist for the niche features of the app. So head on over to episode 1 of that playlist if you want to find out more about the flagship here for the Emirates of Hacan. But in this video, we're gonna focus on the 3 faction abilities, as well as the faction technologies. So the first faction ability is called Masters of Trade, and it reads, you do not have to spend a command token to resolve the secondary ability of the trade strategy card. This is really nice, because if you look at our commodities for this faction, it's 6, which is really emphasizing their focus on the trading and diplomatic side of the game. So the ability to just constantly pick up 6 commodities for free gives you huge leverage for trading and resource spending. The second faction ability is called Guild Ships, which says you can negotiate transactions with players who are not your neighbors. So generally in Twilight Imperium, if you're going to be trading with someone, you have to be adjacent to them on the board, either through units or through controlled planets or via wormhole connections. The other time you can trade is during agenda phase, and then anybody can trade. There is no adjacency restrictions. The Emirates of Hacan allow you to trade just as if it was the agenda phase for the whole game. And this is especially important at the beginning of the game, where it's hard to become neighbors with people. The final faction ability, and this is the most interesting one of them all, is Arbiters. It reads, when you are negotiating a transaction, action cards can be exchanged as part of that transaction. So this was a really unique implementation into the app here, because in the trade menu, or the special trade selector screen, you're used to just seeing commodities, trade goods, and promissory notes as selectable components for trading. But if you do select the Emirates of Hacan to trade with, or you are the Emirates of Hacan, you're going to notice that an extra component shows up, which is the action cards. So we'll see how that works when we get into the game tab, because it is different than we've seen so far in all the videos. We haven't seen trading action cards yet, even in the introductory series. So those are the three faction abilities here. Now let's hop on over into the game tab to look at the faction technologies. The first one I'm going to look at is Quantum Datahub node. And this is a 3-tiered cybernetics faction technology. And it reads, at the end of the strategy phase, you may spend 1 token from your strategy pool and give another player 3 of your trade goods. If you do, give 1 of your strategy cards to that player and take 1 of his strategy cards. So, that's a pretty unique tech in that it comes at the end of the strategy phase when you're selecting strategy cards. And we'll see that in a moment. But before that, let's just look at the second faction technology, which is production biomes. So production biomes is a 2-tiered biotic technology, and it's an action, so you'll be using it at the start of your turn as your action, and it reads, exhaust this card and spend 1 token from your strategy pool to gain 4 trade goods, and choose 1 other player. That player gains 2 trade goods. So this technology can only be used once per turn because it is exhaustible as an action. And it's a card that heavily emphasizes the diplomatic side of the game. So it's a good bargaining chip to have here. You know, who wants free 2 trade goods, and you can get the rest of the table to kind of offer you things for that potentially. So those are the faction technologies. We're going to start by looking at the technologies, and then we'll move on to the abilities after that. And we'll start here with the Quantum Datahub node. We're at the resolve an ability at the end of strategy phase. And so far in games, we haven't seen this step because there has to be relevant cards for these ability rounds to kind of proceed. And one of those relevant cards is Quantum Datahub node. So we'll see here that we've selected Diplomacy and Imperial. And once again, this is a 3-player game, so it is unique in the sense that we get to choose 2 strategy cards. Otherwise, we would just be looking at 1 strategy card. And the other players, if we open up the player info tab, we got Alice has selected Leadership and Trade, and Charlie has selected Technology and Warfare. So perhaps we feel like our strategy cards aren't the greatest, and we want to take this opportunity to exchange one of our perceived weaker cards with a stronger card. So maybe we'll choose to trade Imperial or Diplomacy for another card. And to do this, you navigate over to the Quantum Datahub node technology card, and you're going to double click it. And we'll get a prompt that reads Quantum Datahub node activated. And the first thing we have to do in the prompt is to choose the faction that we want to swap strategy cards with. So we can either, in this game, switch with the Federation of Sol or the Embers of Moat. So let's choose the Embers of Moat and click OK here. And next, we're brought up to a second prompt, which is asking us to choose our own strategy card. Now, normally, there's only one choice to be made. So in fact, there's no choice, because in most games, you only have the 1 strategy card. But in the case of the 3-player variant, you actually have an option here, right? So we have imperial or diplomacy. So let's go ahead and maybe trade off imperial, and we'll click OK. And the final step of this technology is to choose one of Charlie's strategy cards. So we can either take technology or we can take warfare. So maybe we want warfare here. So selecting warfare, we'll click OK, and then we get the final confirmation prompt. Giving imperial to Charlie and taking warfare. Confirm your choices. So this does cost us something, right? It says that we have to spend a token from our strategy pool and also give 3 more trade goods. So if we don't have 3 trade goods, we can't do this. And if we don't have a strategy token, we can't do this either. But seeing as it's the end of strategy phase, we should have at least 1 strategy token. And being the Emirates of Hacan, you're more than likely going to have 3 trade goods to start the turn. So we'll confirm this. And if you looked at the bottom there, you notice now we have warfare instead of imperial. Technology played, quantum Datahub node played by Bob. All right. So in the game log, we can see that for everyone to see. Bob played the quantum Datahub node technology and gave imperial to Charlie to take warfare. Very nice. In the game player info tab, this should all be updated. In our tab, we now have warfare. And in Charlie's tab, Charlie now has imperial. So let's get the other players to pass on this end of strategy phase ability round. Coming back to our turn, if we try to play quantum Datahub node again, we can't because it's already been used this round. So that's quantum Datahub node as we pass on the ability round. All right. Now, before showing off the second technology, which is the production biomes, we're going to look at one of the faction abilities here. And that's going to be Masters of Trade. So to remind you, Masters of Trade says you do not have to spend a command token to resolve the secondary ability of the trade strategy card. So on Alice's turn, we'll navigate over to her tab and we'll activate the trade primary. Now, Alice is going to choose which players she wants to receive the trade secondary for free. Now currently, we have no commodities, so perhaps we want Alice to replenish our commodities. But maybe Alice is feeling greedy today and doesn't want to give anybody free commodities. So she'll just click confirm without giving anyone the opportunity to resolve the trade secondary for free. Now before we get on to our turn to choose to do the trade secondary, we'll have to pass on these ability rounds after someone replenishes commodities, because Alice just replenished commodities. So now we're being asked back in our tab to resolve the secondary ability of the active strategy card. So currently we do have 5 strategy tokens, but I mean, let's just say we had none and we thought we couldn't resolve this and get our six commodities and we wanted to pass. The game will remind us here that as the Emirates of Hacan, you could resolve this ability for free. So we're not going to pass on this because there's no drawback at the moment. Instead, again, taking a look at our 5 strategy tokens, we'll resolve the strategy and we'll be told once again that we don't have to spend a token. So confirming this, we can see that indeed we're still at 5 strategy tokens, and our commodities have been fully replenished up to 6. So that's Masters of Trade. And now we'll pass the ability round here. And then the final player here will just pass on replenishment. And Alice will go ahead and end her turn. That brings us back to our turn. So we're going to look at the second faction technology now, which is production biomes. Production biomes requires us to exhaust this card. Actually, we'll hold off on production biomes. I'm going to go over the other abilities first. Yeah, so now instead of going over production biomes, I want to get to the other 2 faction abilities we have. So we're going to see these 2 work in tandem right now. Guild ships. Notice on the map, we're adjacent to nobody, and we're not in any wormhole systems, so we have 0 adjacency. However, because of guild ships, we're still going to be able to negotiate transactions with everybody. And then we're going to see Arbiters allows us to also include action cards in these transactions. So looking at our deck here, we have a few action cards. We have maneuvering jets, direct hit, sabotage, shield holdings, another sabotage, another direct hit, and maneuvering jets. So we're at our cap here of 7 action cards. So going over to the trade menu here and requesting trade, you'll see that because of our faction, we automatically get the action card trade tab. So we can trade with anyone here. Let's start with Alice. And the first thing we'll see is that when we open up the action cards tab, we actually get access to every possible action card in the game, including redundancies, because we could have multiple action cards of the same type, right? We could have 2 flank speeds, or 3 even. So the first thing we're going to do is see what happens if we try to trade an action card that's not in our hand. So if we try to trade political stability, which we do by checking off the box here, and we send this request over to Alice, and we go over to Alice's tab, Alice can see that we're offering political stability, but Alice has no idea if we actually have this card or not. So if she tries to accept it, it's going to say that we don't own the card, right? So it's worth mentioning here that when you are playing as the Emirates of Hacan and you are trading action cards, you should make sure that you're not trying to trade a card you don't have. Otherwise, you're giving that information away if the other player accepts the trade. And it works vice versa as well. So if I cancel this, Alice can also offer trades to Bob during Bob's turn, right? So if Alice tries to make a request here, if Alice tries to offer to Bob an action card she doesn't have, like Assassinate Representative, and sends the request, the same thing will happen. Bob will find out that Alice doesn't have the Assassinate Representative card. Okay? Now you'll also notice that these trades are completely imbalanced, right? You don't have to exchange one action card for one action card. You can exchange as many or as few as you like, and you can throw in other components into it, such as trade goods, commodities, or one promissory note, right? So I'll show you, using cards we have now, So we have, for example, we have a direct hit and a sabotage. So let's offer Alice a direct hit and a sabotage. If we scroll up to D here, we'll check off a direct hit, and down in S, we'll check off a sabotage. Now you see we have direct hit +1, and when we send the request, that +1 will show up. All right? So we can do that. Now perhaps, we also want something in return. So the way this is going to work is it's going to have to be, you ask Alice, what action cards do you have? And maybe Alice will want to give us Rise of Messiah and Crippling Defenses. So let's rescind this trade. And let's offer Maneuvering Jets and Direct Hit. So we'll say request trade to Alice. And we'll go for Direct Hit and Maneuvering Jets. Okay. In exchange for Rise of a Messiah and Cripple Defenses. Okay. So sending this request, we can see now that we're offering Direct Hit and Maneuvering Jets and requesting Cripple Defense and Rise of a Messiah. All right. So we're going to go ahead and accept this trade. Excuse me. So the trade is accepted. And opening up our action card deck again, you can see those first two cards there. Rise of a Messiah and the other one, I already forget what it was. But over here we have the two cards we asked for, right? Direct Hit and Maneuvering Jets. And over in Bob's tab, we lost those first two cards, Maneuvering Jets and Direct Hit, and we got, it was Cripple Defenses and Rise of a Messiah. So we've done the trade. The action cards have exchanged hands. Now, if you look over at the game log, you'll notice that the game log tells us publicly that how many action cards are traded, but the content of those cards is kept secret between the two players. And they could wish to share that with the other players, but by default, that information is secret. And that's Arbiters and Guild ships all in one there. So, very nice. Trading action cards is a pretty cool thing. Now, for the last unique feature of this faction, we're going to come back to production biomes. So production biomes says, just to remind you here, as an action, exhaust this card and spend 1 token from your strategy pool to gain 4 trade goods, and choose one other player. That player gains 2 trade goods. So we're in the perform action step on our turn, and we're going to be able to select this card by double clicking it. Let's see how many trade goods we have. So we have 8 trade goods, and Charlie has 3, and Alice has 3. So whoever we choose will end up with 5, and should end up with 12. So double clicking the card here, production biomes activated. Choose the faction of the player you wish to give 2 trade goods to. So let's go ahead and give it to Charlie. We'll select the Embers of Mott. And then we're asked to confirm, so we'll do that. Bob used production biomes to gain 4 trade goods. Charlie was chosen to gain 2 trade goods. Opening up the player tab, we're at 12, and Charlie's now at 5. In the game log, we get notified that production biomes was played by Bob, and we chose Charlie to gain 2 trade goods. That brings us to the end of our turn because it was an action. So to note here that this card won't be playable when it comes back to our turn. Only when the turn is over and in the status phase, when the technologies get readied, we'll be able to use it again. And I believe that brings us to the end of all the abilities in faction technologies. Yep. Before we end our turn here, let's see what happens here. So if we offer Charlie 2 action cards, right? So Charlie has 6 action cards. So if we offer him 2, theoretically he should be over the limit and have to discard. I'm not entirely sure if we have this coded in yet, so it's a good chance to find out. So let's offer Charlie Sabotage and Shield Holding, the first 2 there. And we can trade with Charlie still because we haven't done it with him this turn, right? We can't trade with Alice anymore. So I'm going to offer, go down to S, Sabotage and Shield Holding, send request. Going over to Charlie's player tab, we'll accept. Yeah, now we're at 8, right? So something to note here is that what should be happening is that we're over the trade good limit, or not the trade good limit, we're over the action card limit. So we should have to discard these action cards. As of this video, we don't have that in yet, I believe, ending our turn. Yeah. Okay, so thanks for watching here. Hope you found this interesting, learning about these abilities and technologies from the Emirates of Hacan, the 5th faction now in the faction spotlight. And the next one will be the last one of the first 6, the Federation of Soul. All right, see you next time.